But so I am like, at that point, I was at 3 phones that week and tried replacing that one in the store, and it was there. It was me being there for like an hour and finally just being like, can I give you money to give me a phone? Can we do that? Like, I no longer want a deal. I no longer want like the free phone. I just want to pay you money to
Mm-hmm.
give me a phone.
Will you take my
And
money,
and
please?
it was a fight. I still had to fight them because they're like, well, okay, because of the rules, basically, like, this is, you have to do this and you have to do this, you have to pay off this one that you don't have. And I was like, like, what is happening? So anyway, that's how my week was for a couple weeks there. My
Good.
week that lasted a couple of weeks where I got no cell service whatsoever.
I mean,
So shop at T-Mobile,
it sound
everybody.
was all of that happening in January?
Yeah.
Yeah, January
Yeah.
was a long year. It was a long year.
What the fuck is up with January? Like, okay, welcome everyone to Movies and Munchies with Melissa Cox and Beth Johnson today.
Woo!
Say hey.
What's up, guys?
We're just like living my namesake of a brand, I guess, like living with disaster, because that January was a fucking shit show. I don't know.
January was hard. January was a very long year.
Yeah.
We've made it through. Here's to February, where
Yep.
things potentially could be better or worse. We don't know, but
We're gonna
at
find
least
out, and we're
at
gonna
least
hope for
it's
the
not
best.
January anymore. January was just poof.
You know what?
I feel
This
like
is
January's always hard.
right.
January's always
It's
hard.
because a year should not start in the middle of winter.
It really shouldn't. It's the worst. It's a brand new year, but it's dark all the time and it's cold and you
And
can't
we're all
enjoy
low on
your
vitamin
life.
D.
Nobody has enough vitamin D. No
I
one.
literally had a dream last night about, like, I don't know, I was at this fancy ass house, like touring it or something. I think I go on the Facebook groups with like old houses and weird houses too much because now
Sure.
they're invading my dreams.
Yeah.
And there was like, in this house, there was like a really bougie patio, and it had like a vintage, this was like dream logic. This was like a 1960s 70s like tanning bed, and it's like completely chrome, and it's just for like sitting out with like the sort of what's the word that I'm looking for? It's like sun that's not quite hitting, indirect lighting, right?
Right.
Like indirect sun, so that you're
Mhm.
kind of getting tanned, but like also kind of protected under the, I don't know. It was a weird dream. There were a lot of other weird things about it. But apparently my body and my brain are like, we need some vitamin D. Like,
Mhm.
we need it.
Mhm.
I am not a person. I am not a sun worshiper. I do not go out in the sun. Like, I like gardening, but
Mhm.
I do it the first couple of hours in the morning, and then I'm done. I'm staying inside for the rest of the day.
I I really enjoy being outdoors. And but like that's with a caveat, right?
Yeah.
I don't mean I enjoy being outdoors in that I enjoy outdoor
The
sports.
outdoors.
And I enjoy being outside,
Just
but
like existing
and
outside.
yeah, and like I'll play around in my garden, but then I just kind of really enjoy being outside on my patio with like a book and some coffee.
Mhm.
Like I don't want
Yeah.
to go hiking, for
No.
instance. That sounds terrible.
I want to be able to like ideally in a perfect world there would not be mosquitoes.
Right?
And I don't care much about most other bugs, like whatever, spiders are awesome even if I
Disagree.
want them to generally stay away from me.
Yes.
They're very helpful. They're friends.
I know.
Um
I only kill them if they come in my home.
Well, even then, like, depends on what kind.
They don't belong in my house. They live outside. That's their space. This is my space. 'Cause I
But they're
don't
gonna eat the other bugs for you. That's why they're there.
that's why they're outside because the other bugs are outside.
Mm.
I
We'll just
can't.
agree to disagree. That's
We're
okay.
gonna have to.
That's okay.
I don't like them in my home. I don't really like any bug in my house or any animal that's not like a
Fair.
dog or a cat maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
My kid keeps trying to find the right way to sell me on getting a snake
mm-mm.
or a hamster. And both of those sound like a lot of money to keep up with.
Yes. Yes.
So
I have
mhm.
heard that snakes are really good pets. Um,
Yeah, I just it there is only so much room, and I have a house full of neurodivergent people
yeah,
who are
somebody's
not
gonna
going to
forget
keep
to
up. I
somebody's
am going to be the keeper of the snake, is what's going to happen, and I don't
right,
really want to right now.
right. Um,
Also, I don't want
my
my cat. I don't know how cats feel about snakes. I don't know.
sure, sure, is I don't either. I'll be honest with you,
Okay.
I don't either. My kid wants, my oldest kid wants a turtle. Turtles are a lot of work.
Yes, they are.
They are a lot of work, and they're stinky.
Yes, they are.
And my oldest kid is not neurotypical.
Yeah.
He is not
Yep.
neurotypical. And so I'm gonna be the keeper of the turtle. And
Yes, you
also
are.
turtles live forever.
Yeah, they do.
So when this kid, like, let's
Gets
say he
bored
goes
and
to
goes to
college.
college. Yep.
Yeah, what happens when he goes to college? Then it's my turtle. I don't want a turtle.
That's a lifelong decision. It's like getting a bird. Like,
Right.
that is a lifetime choice.
And I always like I love my dogs, right? And I always say that dogs don't live long enough. And I stand by that. Dogs and cats, we bring them into our home
Yeah.
and they don't live long enough. But also, I'm not sure I want a pet that's gonna live as long as I do
Or longer.
or longer, because then what happens to it after I'm gone?
I mean, that's the animals that fill up rescues, right? A lot of
Right,
those are because people passed on and they had a macaw or something
right,
that doesn't like usually your family members are not going to want to take that on because it's a
right,
whole thing.
right.
Birds are mean. Like, I don't know. Other
I
people can have birds and I have had birds in my life and I don't want them in my life more.
I this is how I know I'm getting old, right? Um, this is one of the signs that I'm old. I love the birds that are outside.
Yeah.
I love to like I put out my bird feeders in the spring and summer and I love to watch them come and eat. And I don't want to take care of one in my house though. That seems, I don't know, weird. I don't really like I'm like I like to watch the birds, but they also kind of scare me.
That's fair. We had a whole episode about birdemic, and I feel like that's fair. Like that's
I mean, sure.
reasonable.
Birdemic was a good episode, even if it was
Speaking
not a
of
great movie.
yes. Well, isn't that the way? Isn't that the
Yes.
way? Like, I mean, that's why we pick cult movies because like even when they're good, there's still some weird stuff to talk about.
Right,
Like,
right.
for instance, this episode is about Harold and Maude. This
Yes.
is one of my actual favorite movies from childhood. Which again, as any time that I mention what my favorite movies were as a child, it just says a lot about who I am as a person. Um,
It really does. It really does. People who know you now as an adult, and when you say this was a favorite childhood movie, Harold and Maude, they're like, "Yeah, that tracks." Based on who you are, I can see it.
so Harold and Maude was made in 1971. It is
Mhm.
listed as a comedy romance.
Okay.
It's it's where do I start? So Bud Cort is the like the main character, the main male lead. And I had a huge crush on him when
Of course.
I was a kid.
Sure.
Because again, like that doesn't entirely make sense, but sure. Um
Sure.
I think I had a crush. Again, I fell in love with characters. Like this
Right.
is why I read
But
so much fan fiction.
I would assume that you had a crush on Harold
Yes, I had a
instead
crush
of
on Harold.
Bud Cort. You had
Bud
a crush
Cort.
on Harold.
Exactly. I absolutely had a crush on Harold, and yeah, that's a little interesting.
That's something that we could unpack at a later date for sure.
It's fine. Yeah, so he's a disillusioned 20-year-old obsessed with suicide and lovable and he's obsessed with suicide, and as we meet her, Maude, who is an 80-year-old eccentric. Just that's
Right.
her job. She's just an eccentric.
Yeah.
And they meet at a funeral, which they both attend regularly. Like they both regularly attend funerals just as a pastime, a hobby.
Yes. They just enjoy funerals.
They just enjoy going to them. He is a little bit more like somber and respectful of the funeral process, and she is a little bit more not. And
Yes.
which is basically her entire personality. Maude's entire personality is nothing is real, nothing matters, so go have fun.
Yeah, so do what you want because
Do what you want.
nothing matters. Do what makes you happy.
Exactly. And not like go have fun at the expense of other people in a mean way, but like if she happens to bother people because she's doing something that she is essentially chaotic good. Like she's not doing things that are evil or even like necessarily mean or bad, but they are annoying to those around her occasionally.
Right. Well, she does steal a lot of cars, and that's not
so many cars.
That's not ideal. But she never keeps them.
No, she always like leaves them, and you know what? Honestly, like she only steals the ones with keys in them. That's on the people who left them.
Right.
Who leaves their cars with the keys in it? People who want their car stolen.
Yeah, that tells me that you wanted your car to be stolen.
Okay, I think we're like maybe nearing some problematic logic here.
Sure, that happens. But you know, she is an eccentric, and she's very much the person who's going to find the fun in every situation. She's going to find the positive in whatever's happening. And there are several times when Harold is telling her something that is upsetting to him.
Yeah.
And she's like, but look at it this way.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't have to be that way. It could be this way.
Yeah. And she kind of just opens up his whole universe.
Right.
Which is why he becomes a little bit obsessed with her.
Right.
And okay, so go ahead.
No, where are we in the movie?
I was like, let's backtrack a little. Yeah. Okay, so at the beginning of the movie, I will say this, like having watched so many 1970s films in the last couple of weeks, I don't know what specifically spurred this, but like I've watched a lot. Like everybody, I mean, I have a lot from the 70s that I love because the sense of humor was just very dry. It was very, very dry then. And then also like everyone else that I've talked to has also kind of had like a movie that they loved from the 1970s.
Mm-hmm.
but so we come upon like this intro that's very long and like nothing's really happening, which is my
Right.
point of like that seemed to be the thing in a 1970s movie is like
Right.
we're going to put the credits over just sort of panning. We're just slowly panning across
Right.
nothing.
Whatever. Yeah.
And so it's in this like very traditional staid sort of room.
Yeah.
And Harold is sort of moving around, setting things up. And as the credits finish up, we find that he's setting up his suicide.
Right.
That is a big, big trigger warning for this whole episode.
Right.
That's a big theme. He is sort of obsessed with suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And so we see him hang himself. And his mother walks in. His mother is not, she's very like, she's just tired. His mother is so tired.
And she doesn't even say anything in regards to what he has done. She doesn't react in any way. She sits down and she makes a phone call and cancels an appointment that she had.
Yep. Because she's like, well, I'm just too wound up now, basically.
Yeah. And, you know, once she's done with the phone call, she finally looks over at him and she says, you know, she kind of critiques his performance. And
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
she walks out of the room.
Yep. And that's it. That's the whole interaction. And then as he's like still hanging there, because he commits to the scene. As he's still hanging there with his head sort of cocked, as she exits, he finally like opens his eyes and sort of looks over to where she's gone.
Yeah.
And that really does set the tone for this whole movie. He obviously like has money.
Mm-hmm.
Harold is like a 20-something guy that's just really depressed and tired of life.
Right.
And is making do the best he can
Mm-hmm.
in his little bubble. Like, I don't know if it hasn't occurred to him to leave the bubble.
Right.
But he is still there in his very moneyed life.
Yeah.
Presumably his father died a long time ago.
Right.
His mother seems to be the only one that he has, aside from his uncle who is in the military, and which is like a whole other situation.
Right.
So he's just doing the best he can. He finds like his mother buys him a car at some point, a little sports car. It's very like,
it's a she says it's a Jaguar. It's a little Jaguar.
Yeah. It's very adorable.
Yes.
And also very much not Harold.
Right.
So before this, like he went to a junkyard and found a hearse and fixed the hearse up. It looks beautiful when he fixes it up, and she sees it and she's like,
Harold.
No, Harold, you can't do that. And so she buys him a Jaguar.
Right.
And then he takes the Jaguar and turns it, like paints it black and adds a little thing to the back of it so that it's like this tiny little sports car hearse.
Right.
And it's also adorable. And that was definitely on my list of, I want that.
It's like you can almost hear Harold saying, I wanted a hearse.
Yeah.
And so, like, this car is cute, but I wanted a hearse. So I'm going to make a hearse.
He's very, like, I definitely noticed on this watch through, because, like, when I watched this as a kid, I mostly fixated on Maude and Harold's interactions. And also just like his sort of I want that and I'm gonna do that, which is a very like childlike thing to do. And as an adult, I'm like, you are definitely 20 years old, baby. Like, you are completely self-obsessed because you are just stuck in your own head. Like, you're just
Right.
stuck and you cannot fathom things ever being different, except in this very dramatic, like, over the top way that you're basically just pushing back against your mom. Like, that's all this is in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And because if you wanted to be your own person, if you wanted to do something completely different, you could go elsewhere and do
Right.
that.
Right.
Like, you don't have to have the money if you decide that you don't want it.
Right.
But
And
it doesn't occur to him.
after he meets Maude, they meet at this
Mhm.
funeral, and and she tells him at the funeral that she says, I'll be 80 next week or whatever.
Yep.
And she says, I think 80 that's the perfect age to die, right? 75 is too soon because there's still so much to do. And 85 is too late. You're just waiting for it to happen.
Yep.
But 80 would be perfect. And he's like, she's insane. And then he
But I
runs
kind
into
of
her.
like it.
Right. And he runs into her again, the next day at another funeral.
Mhm.
And they steal the
After she
car.
has stolen his car, yes.
Yeah, they steals the car and then, like,
Drives up to him and invites him into his
into his
car.
car, yeah, and, he's like, "She's insane," and I'm here for it, right? She's, like, a fun kind of insane, and then he gets obsessed with her, right?
Because
And
she's a manic pixie dream grandma.
she
Like,
is, and I mean, I think we could definitely say that Maude suffers from bipolar disorder, probably.
there's something
Um,
going on. Or I
we
don't know. I don't know because, like, okay, later in the movie, as we get more backstory on her, I think she's just been through so much fucking life and
Yeah,
trauma that she doesn't give a shit anymore.
right, and, you know, the first time she takes him to her house, and she's showing him all of her artwork, which was just funny, like the paintings, and then she goes to the
And the
olfactory
sculpture.
stuff, and then she's like, but then I decided, I wanted to do tactile stuff, so, she shows him this sculpture, and it looks when you look at it, I don't know about everybody else, but my first thought was, "Oh, look, a vulva."
Yep.
Um, and she's like, you have to touch it. It's meant to be touched." And so she turns and she's like making tea or something, and Harold starts
Mhm.
touching it, and then, like, it was very sexual. Like, he first he puts his hands on it, and he's like, "Okay," and then he's running his hands on, and then he's putting his mouth on it,
And then
and
he's like sticking his arm through it,
yes, and it's
and then
like,
he's
"Okay,
sticking
okay."
his head through it
Right, and, like, "Okay." This got very weirdly sexual very quickly.
very quickly.
Um, so that was fun, and then, did they, not like nothing happened.
And then they have tea
Yeah,
and ginger pie, and
yeah.
that's it.
And but Maud has, like, she has so much stuff. She lives in this tiny trailer, but there's so much stuff in it, so much really interesting stuff. And
Yeah.
I feel like every time Harold goes there, she's showing him some new thing. And, you know, as much as he is drawn to her because of her eccentricities, because of her sunshine,
Mhm.
she is drawn to him just as much. And
Yeah.
I wonder, for me, it was a little less clear to see exactly what drew her to him.
I think it's like she's remembering her youth a little bit
Yeah, and I
and
like
remembering who she has been.
and I kind of wondered if she wanted, like, if she could tell how
Yeah.
damaged he was, and she just
Mhm.
wanted to save him because she knew what it was like to be that damaged in the past.
Yeah, because I mean, when we heal, like, isn't that kind of the hope, is that like we can help
Right.
somebody else
Right.
through that same moment that we know that we survived. And
Right.
we didn't think that we were gonna survive, but we did.
Right. And I kind of think that that was initially why Maude was drawn to him.
Yeah.
And it becomes something more for both of them than just trying to save each other or whatever, but it was really beautiful, to watch from that first encounter at a funeral to,
Where
like.
he's yeah, where he's standing, and again, he's very solemn and respectful of the funeral of the person he does not know.
Right.
Like, he doesn't know any of these people. He
No.
just goes to them as a pastime
Right.
because he's sort of obsessed with death and dying, which we later find out is because when he was like in boarding school, which again, money,
Right.
um, he like had this moment where everybody thought he was dead for
Yeah.
an evening, and he got to see his mother's reaction. Like, he happened to be in the exact place and moment where the police come to their door and tell his mother that he died, and he saw her reaction and saw how torn up she was
Mhm.
about him having like presumably died.
Right. And he felt her love for him in
Mhm.
that moment. And that's, and you get the feeling, you get the idea that that's why he keeps faking a suicide, is because he wants to feel that
That
love from
same
her again, that
feeling,
same connection to her.
it becomes an addiction.
Right. And but and she, of course, as I'm not sure that mom took the healthiest route in dealing with Harold's obsession with suicide. But I mean, she stopped having any reaction towards it other than,
Yeah.
"This is driving me nuts,
Yep.
and we have to do something."
She's very, very waspy. Like,
Yeah,
again, they come from money, and she has the waspiest reactions to things
yeah.
where she's just like, "Oh, I'm going to have to cancel my nail appointment because I'm just too torn up." She
Right,
says in the calmest voice possible.
right. And, and she has different ideas about how to help him through this, and her first idea is that he needs to go speak with his uncle, and he needs to join the army.
Mhm.
And so he does that, and he goes to speak with his uncle, and his uncle's like, you have freedom and you'll see the world and it's awesome and it's great. And, we can send you to the war and
Yep.
you'll immediately go to war and that'll be
Yep.
so much fun. And
He tells him all sorts of war stories.
right.
Like,
And
that's just the
as
thing that's gonna sell him.
as someone, I'm sure you do too, who like knows people who have gone to
Yep.
war, I don't know any of them who've described it as fun.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. That is a that his uncle is certainly a character. He
Yeah,
is
the uncle could definitely be unpacked at length.
his
But
uncle
it's
needs therapy more than Harold does, I think.
right, right. And but so it's decided, right? Harold's gonna
Yeah.
join and he's gonna be in the army, they're gonna send him to war. And he and Maude concoct a plan to
Mhm.
get him out of it that, just is
It's
essentially Harold is going
wonderful.
to behave as if he is incredibly bloodthirsty and he cannot
He's
wait
super
to
into
murder
it.
people. He cannot
He's
wait to
so
murder and
into it.
kill.
It's
And,
amazing.
you know, he's like, I can't, are they going to teach me, hand to hand combat? Oh, yeah, I can't wait just to feel somebody die in my hands. And
Do I get to stab people?
can I
Like,
slit
do I
their
get to
throats? Can I
bayonet? Do I get to learn the bayonet?
Right. He's incredibly into it. And then in comes Maud, who's protesting the military. And he's like play acting that he's furious with her and he's going to kill her. Like he's so excited to kill
Yeah.
somebody, he's going to kill her.
Because he
And
feels
then,
like she's being disrespectful by being a commie bastard. Like,
right. Yeah, I think that's what he calls her, commie
yeah.
bastard. And his uncle is like, okay, but settle down. This is not, we're not going to
Like,
kill
even,
her.
I will say, like, even his uncle at that point, like, he starts going off on the bloodthirsty tangent.
Yeah.
And even his uncle is like, actually, like,
He's like, it's not, just calm down a little,
it's
maybe.
not just about killing people.
Um, and then, of course, in that scene, Maude dies. He kills her,
Mhm.
and so he can't join the army anymore, right? Because he's
No.
crazy
His
as shit.
uncle's like, this is a bad idea. He's gonna go to jail.
We're
He's
not gonna
gonna commit war crimes.
we're not gonna do this.
Yeah.
So he's off the hook for that, and he and Maude, celebrate. Perfect. And then Mom's next idea is she decides, right, that he it's just time for him to get married.
He just needs a wife. That'll
He
settle
needs a
him
wife.
down.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
she signs him up on what I'm assuming is the 1970s version of eHarmony or Match.com, right?
It's like video dating when you actually like back when you actually had to record
A
like
video.
a video, or if not that, like put down all of your information and a matchmaker. I mean, matchmakers have been around forever.
Forever. And they have, this questionnaire that they're filling out, and Mom is reading the questions aloud, and
Yeah.
Harold is not responding in any way. She's just answering them.
She's answering for herself as it
And
becomes clearer.
yeah, and there's one question, it was like, "Do you feel like that, like, media is over sexualized or something like that?" And she's like, "I would have to say absolutely yes, absolutely, I feel that way," and things like that, and it's Harold has no input. He doesn't
No,
volunteer any information, and she honestly doesn't seem to expect it to.
no. Their relationship is very much just they don't expect anything of the other person. Like they're
Right,
completely self-involved and then confused as to why the other person doesn't understand how they suffer.
right.
Like they are just so waspy. Like I
Mhm.
don't know of a better just like a better genuine like sort of tongue in cheek but really genuine like example of a very waspy family.
Yeah. It's yeah, and,
Yeah.
like, Harold is just completely unconcerned with the idea of having to get married,
Yep.
and
Well, I think he actually is sort of okay with like the dating situation once he realizes, okay, this is, you know what, my mom hasn't given me any reactions in a long time, but this is a new batch of people that I can
right,
annoy and
right,
upset.
right, and yeah, so every time he meets one of these girls, he does something
He stages
uh,
his suicide.
right. Like, one time he, like, just chops off his own hand,
Yep. Or
and
sets himself on fire,
mhm, mhm,
presumably.
um, it's just and every time, like, these women come in and they meet the mom, and then there's after he does something like this, there's always the scene of them, like, driving away in their car.
Yeah.
They're
Or
they're like
screaming and running away.
they're like, "You know what? I am out. No,
Yeah,
thank you."
except the last girl who is
The actress,
crazier than he is.
right.
So,
They
at
probably
that
would have
point, I
made a
think
good couple.
Harold Harold also realizes she's too much for me. Um,
Yeah.
because he commits Harry Carey.
Mhm.
He has like again, because this boy has way too much money, he has an actual samurai sword and ceremonial knife, that I cannot remember the name of, but like actual antiques that one commits Harry Carey with.
Right.
And so he demonstrates to her because she doesn't know what it is. And, you know, rips the knife with quotes around his stomach, and then she is just enthralled. She's like,
Yeah.
you committed, and that was so good.
Yeah.
And then we see her best performance
Right.
from when she did Juliet in Romeo and Juliet, and she commits quote suicide with the knife now that
Right. Yeah.
retracts, the
She
retractable blade,
performs the final scene of Romeo and Juliet.
and it's real bad.
It's so bad. And at that point, like, mom comes in and she's like, Jesus Christ.
Really, mom should have leaned into it and been like, you know what? They can go do this together. Like, they can, if I just push them together, they will leave me alone.
She was like, fucking shit.
Mom is just so put upon.
She really is. She is so very put upon.
She just wants her 20-year-old son to leave her house. She's like,
Right.
I just go do something. Go
Just
do something else.
Go be somebody else's problem because I can't with you anymore.
Yeah. You're a lot.
Which is kind of like, to an extent, that's kind of fair because he's an adult human.
Yeah. He's a full-grown person.
Go work out your fucking life. It's time for you to take responsibility for your life.
And again, watching this as an adult, like a full-grown actual adult, like in my late 30s,
right?
As opposed to like a teenager, where all I saw was like, yes, I identify so much with him. Because we are sort of dramatic when we're teenagers, when we're kids.
Sure.
Like, I have mentioned many times how my favorite fairy tales are the bloody ones, like Bluebeard. And yeah.
Sure. That tracks.
Yeah, it does.
That tracks.
My favorite ones are Bluebeard and the red shoes, where her feet get cut off and she has to dance on bloody stumps.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are my favorite fairy tales.
Sure. I mean, I can see that about you, about who you are as a person. That's not shocking. But
he is as dramatic as I felt inside.
Sure.
Like, he is full of drama.
He's the most dramatic, you know.
And as a full-grown adult, I'm like, I feel a connection with his mother just a little bit. Right. Where I'm like, you are exhausting.
Right. Like if you were my kid, like, okay, I love you, but
yeah. And
I love you. And also, you're a lot.
Honestly, I mean, she has enough money that she could have paid for him to go to drama school. That
right.
Or art school, some sort of thing.
A sanitarium.
I mean, so she does pay for him to have therapy. Unfortunately, it's the 70s, and we are still very deeply in Freudian psychotherapy territory, where it really is not helpful for him.
And, you know, after he has, you know, he's scared off his third potential wife, he and Maude are at a carnival, and you know, he very sweetly makes her a little thing that says Harold loves Maude, and she's like, oh, Maude loves Harold, and it is really sweet. And then, you know, they presumably have sex. They sleep together.
Find them in bed with no shirts on.
Right.
With a blanket covering them.
I think that's the assumption, right? And so he goes to his mother and he's like, I have found my wife. And tells her, you know, who he's going to marry. And she's like, you've got to be joking.
What?
And so he goes, then there's this really weird montage of like the therapist, you know, telling the therapist he's going to marry this very nearly 80-year-old woman.
Yeah.
And the therapist is like, this is a situation where you are in love with your mother and you cannot marry and have sex with your mother. So you're going to.
Except this time you're in love with your grandmother. And
Right.
that I don't understand.
And he's like, "But I don't know what this means." And then, like, the final one is, a priest. And the priest was really disgusting. He was like, "The thought of your firm young body with the
It was
old,
very uncomfortable.
saggy, wrinkly buttocks," and,
He
like,
is he's picturing it.
he's
He's
like, "I find it very distasteful." And,
I
like,
find the
I found that
description
scene distasteful, thank you,
distasteful.
because
The
you like
priest is making it more uncomfortable than it should have been.
right, and, but Harold, he has every intention
Yeah,
of marrying Maude.
'cause he loves her.
He loves her, she loves him, and he's needs to get married, and
Yep,
so Maude it is.
yep,
And it's kind of after that where the movie takes a turn.
yep. I mean, as is tradition with this podcast, like, if you cared about spoilers, you probably shouldn't be watching.
Right,
Um,
so if you
I
haven't seen Harold and Maude yet, now
Yeah,
is the time you pause
yep,
this podcast, go watch it, and then circle back.
yep. We're gonna
Because
give you just a second. All right, so um he prepares this like just spectacular birthday for her in her, like, is it a trailer or is it a converted caboose? Because I think it's like a converted train caboose.
yeah, that makes more sense than it being a trailer.
And it's, I think, by a quarry. I don't
Yeah,
know,
I
it's like
yeah,
parked in a quarry.
and
um
but it is this just really spectacular 80th birthday celebration.
and he makes like all of these sunflowers because they were in a wildflower field at some point, and there are just so many flowers that he's put up, all like just covering her trailer, caboose, whatever, her place. And he asks her to marry him, and
And and she says, she's looking around and she says, "This is the perfect farewell party." And he's like, "Farewell? You're not going anywhere." And that's when she tells him that she says, "I took the tablets,
about an
an
hour.
hour ago. I'll be
Yeah.
gone by midnight."
Yep.
And it's at that point you realize she told him at the beginning, 80
Exactly what was gonna happen.
was when she wanted to die, when she turned
Yeah,
80. And, there's this
and
very
she was
sad,
telling the truth.
yeah, she never lied to him. He just didn't understand
He
what she
didn't.
was saying.
Yeah.
And I thought a really interesting turn of events for him to have been the one all of this time that is obsessed with suicide,
Yeah.
and she's the one who does it.
Yeah. And
And
not out of, like, desperation, not out of depression, presumably, but also we don't know, right? Because
right,
there are so many people who w like, if we look back on the history right before they have committed suicide, they seemed the happiest
right.
sometimes, like, right before, because it was done, it was settled.
They
Like, they
had made
didn't
the
have to,
decision.
that was it, right? And that's kind of how she is.
Yeah,
She's already decided, so she doesn't have to worry about that anymore.
right. And, we presumably we meet Maud after she has made this decision.
Yeah,
So, we don't know who she was before she made the decision.
we get
She could have
glimpses,
she could have
right?
been
Like,
in a depression, and there are definitely times throughout the movie where, when she's talking about her past and
yeah,
stuff, that she will get very morose.
she has lived a very full life, and, like, think about the time of this movie. This is in the 70s. and she's 80 years old.
Right.
She has been through several world wars. She is from England. Like they specify that at some point. Like she is British,
Yeah, she moved
even
from
though
England.
even though she's been here for like most of her adult life, I think.
Yeah.
But she has been through the Holocaust. She
Right.
has been through just so much life.
And that's you see at one point Harold notices on her wrist she has her number from the Holocaust tattooed on her wrist,
Yep.
and so she's a Holocaust survivor.
Yeah.
And that's dark. That was hard for her.
And yet she faces like all of these things
Right,
with just like she is humanity.
right,
She is the essential hope that we
right,
have inside of us.
right. And you know, when she tells Harold that she has taken the tablets and she's going to die, he can't accept that, right? He
Yeah.
cannot let her go. So he, calls an ambulance. She's taken to the hospital. There's nothing that they can do for her. And she does, like, even though, he tried to save her, she dies. And I mean, it was just a tragic turn of events, right? And even this
Yep.
was the first time I had watched it. I watched it the other day. It was the first time. And I like the whole tone of the movie changes
It
with one scene.
shifts. Yep.
Like everything changes with that scene.
Yep. It's like
And
suddenly all of the depression that he has carried around, like that's been kind of very heavy and ever present, suddenly feels earth shattering.
right. And like that one scene changes the way that you see the whole rest of the movie that came before that. Like you go back and you
Yeah.
think about it and you're like, I mean, wow.
Yep.
Like we said, like
Like
was
you,
she so
you
happy
knew.
and carefree because she had made the decision? And maybe she wasn't always like that. But she decided it was okay to start stealing cars because she was only gonna live for another week.
And stealing
And
palm trees, which is like
and,
one of my favorite parts of the
they
movie.
dig up a tree that has
Yeah.
been planted in a planter on the sidewalk because it's dying. And they
Mhm.
save it. And, running from the cops, and she's a nude model for an ice sculpturist. Is that what he's sculpting? Ice? I
Maybe?
don't know. She's a nude model for a sculptor. And
Yeah.
it's just before that, was she in a depression, and making the decision to die was what did
Yeah.
it for her? But
Or maybe she just decided that this is exactly how long she wanted to live.
yeah,
Like, and
maybe,
that's it.
like,
I
that
don't know.
she didn't want to have to grow too old to do these things that she enjoyed doing,
Yeah.
like stealing trees and
Yes.
cars.
I mean, yeah, maybe that was her greatest fear, right? Like of being incapable of
Right,
living life the way that she wanted to live.
right,
And
and
that's, I mean,
it's
for,
it's kinda beautiful,
yeah,
and that's, when you asked me when we first hopped on here, you asked how I liked the movie, and I still stand by my response is it was lovely. It was a lovely film,
yeah,
and, in the end, after Maude dies, we get, these scenes of Harold driving his car very fast through very windy roads,
up up this like great big hill.
right, like, winding up this huge hill, and then we get up there and you see he's driving towards a cliff,
Yeah.
and it's like, "Oh, no, is he really doing it this time?" Because Maude is gone, and the car goes over the side of the cliff and
Crashes.
crashes into the rocks and rubble below,
Yep.
and then the camera goes back to the top of the cliff, and there stands Harold with his banjo that Maude gave him and told him to learn to
Mhm.
play, and he just walks off, and you think, maybe he's gonna be alright. Maybe he
Yeah.
has found, a better
It's
way to live.
like in experiencing her, like, again, like, it amazes me that this is like a week. This is a
Right.
week of his life.
1 week.
1 week, and he is completely confronted with another way to live, and also kind of how he is affecting people, like,
Mhm.
when he talks about suicide.
Right.
Um, he is forced to get out of himself a little bit
Mhm.
and confront that.
And I think, he keeps, performing his own suicides for his mother and for others also, and I think after Maude dies, that's the first time that he has been on the other side of it
Yeah,
and seen, what people would go through if he actually did it, right?
yeah.
And I think that probably changes how he sees things to an extent, but, you do get the feeling at the end that Harold is, while he's still obviously very sad, that he is more at peace.
And also that I think he makes an active choice.
Right,
Like, I think before that, he's just sort of floating along.
right,
He's existing, he's not living.
right,
He's just sort of existing in this half-life, and then as he is confronted with actual mortality, he makes an active choice to live.
right, and I think I kind of got the feeling too that he was turning his back on his rich, waspy lifestyle because
Yeah,
he destroys the car, but also in the scene, where he turns away and he's got the banjo, he's also, like, for possibly the first time in the film, he's not wearing a suit.
yeah,
He's just wearing, like,
mm,
slacks and a shirt,
yep.
and, I think, destroying the car and having on different clothes was very symbolic for he's
He's
realized
shed.
that the life of being a rich wasp was part of what was suffocating him, and
Yeah, that
he's
he's never gonna find a fulfilling life in that world.
right, and he's walking away from all of it, and that's beautiful,
It really
you know?
is.
It was it was a lovely film. Even though it was sad, and
Yeah,
I
and
was just as
weird.
shocked I was just as shocked as Harold to find out Maude had taken the tablets, but
Yep.
of course, then I was like, "I mean, but she told us, right?"
She did tell us, we just didn't listen very
Yeah,
well.
we weren't listening, just like Harold, we weren't listening,
Mhm.
and, but it's a weird movie for sure, um, lots of weird things happening,
Yeah.
and
I was trying to describe this movie to a couple of friends the other night, and as with any like, my in-person friends just sort of look at me like, "Okay." Whenever
Right,
I describe my favorite movies to them.
mhm.
Granted, I tend to, like, bury the lead a lot,
Yeah,
or,
I can see that
um
about you.
yeah. It's just I don't
But
know. Like, I don't know how to that's why I have this podcast, because I wanna talk about the things that are indescribable about these movies.
right,
Like,
and so something that made me upset after I watched the movie, um, when you watch movies on these streaming services, after the movie goes off, it's like, if you liked this movie,
yeah,
here are some other movies that are like it that you will also
yeah.
enjoy. And so what comes up that's like this movie that I would enjoy is Mrs. Robinson. And I was
That's
like,
a totally different
"No."
tone.
Like,
That's a completely different tone.
just because it's an older woman and a younger man,
Or because it's from the '70s,
like,
like,
they're not the same.
not at all.
Because it's to me, Harold and Maude's relationship was very pure.
It was no one else understood it, and they didn't
No.
have to.
Right.
but
The relationship in Mrs. Robinson was less pure.
toxic is what it is.
Right. Um,
Um,
it was not healthy.
no.
But Harold and Maude were very good for each other. They were very healthy for each other.
Yeah.
And their love was true and it was pure.
Yep.
And,
I will say, like,
it's
I think if you want a movie that's sort of similar to this, like tonally,
yeah,
I would say probably Being There is,
which is by the same, director,
yeah,
right?
which tracks.
Right,
Like whenever I try to tell people, like, okay, like, what kinds of movies do you like? It's good. It's sort of like, so if you're finding your style of movie,
right,
pay attention to the directors,
right,
because even if they don't have the same writer, even if they don't have the same actors, if they have the same director, if you like the style that
right,
that director does, you're probably going to like some others by them.
right. Um,
Like, some of my favorites are by, like, Wes Anderson or
mhm,
the Coen brothers.
right. Just I was upset to see this movie being compared to Mrs. Robinson in the sense that they are similar
It's
films.
but it yeah, it's definitely there are very, like, surface similarities,
Right.
not deep.
But no. But it was a lovely film. Definitely, if you have not seen it, worth the watch.
Absolutely.
But if you made it this far, we have spoiled it.
Yeah.
So, but if you haven't
Honestly,
seen
though,
it in a while, go back to it. It's gonna make your heart just as happy
it
as
really
ever.
is. It's most of the movies that I love get better the more that you watch them.
Right,
Like,
right.
it's just you pick up on things that like, the first time you watch it, you're trying to take it all in and you don't know
Mhm,
what to expect. The
right.
second time you get to pay attention to those things that you didn't notice the first time. And then they keep, like, my favorite movies have layers, like, just
Mhm.
so many layers.
Yeah, just and I'm kind of I enjoy movies across genres and across time periods, but there kind of is something about movies from the '70s that are just, I don't know, just a little different, maybe a little better.
Maybe it's like the film too, right? Like the quality of the film
Yeah,
was very muted.
right.
And if I knew more technical stuff about filmmaking, I'm sure I could
Sure.
tell you, like, oh, well, that's because they used this kind of camera and film
Right,
and
right,
lighting.
and
I don't
it's
know.
yeah,
I
there's
just know
probably
it feels sepia toned.
yeah, and there's probably a nostalgia
Yeah.
factor in there somewhere, but I don't somehow I generally feel like movies from the '70s generally are more meaningful, they're deeper.
I think we get that sometimes still, right? I think it's
Yeah,
just that, like, but it's sort of like when you're listening to an oldies station
mhm,
and you on an oldie station, you're going to hear the ones that survived. You're not going to
right,
hear all of the films, like, you're not going to hear all of the songs that were there as well, they just weren't all that great.
right,
um or you're going to hear the ones that survived and are most popular, whereas
right,
there might be some really good ones back there, but
mhm,
you don't get to hear those on, like, the oldie station because they were not the top hits that made it. And
right,
that's sort of,
and kind of speaking of music, the score for this film was Cat
I love
Stevens.
Cat Stevens
He,
so much.
he performed every song in the
Mhm.
score, and that was really cool, because Cat Stevens, awesome,
It's amazing. It's
and,
amazing.
I thought that was really cool, but it was a great movie, it was a great watch, and, my dad is also a lover of movies, specifically older movies, and I asked him last night if he'd ever watched it, he was like, "Of course."
Yeah.
obviously. And I said, "Did you like it?" And he was like, "Oh, yeah, I watch it at least once a year."
Aw.
And
Well, that's kind of lovely.
it is. He can be lovely when he tries.
When he tries.
Yeah. But, it's it's a good movie. It was good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. So this week, I went through a lot of trial and error to find the recipe that works for this
Mhm.
movie because so in one of those scenes where they're in her like when he's first meeting her in her home,
Yeah.
they have ginger pie and oat straw tea.
Right.
And when you try Googling ginger pie, nothing exists. Like there's no I mean, there are like ginger and whatever pies,
Yeah.
but like okay, so honestly, because I am who I am, like looking at that scene and looking at like him cutting into the pie and the texture, what I can tell from what it looks like and the color, I would bet that what they used was like a pumpkin pie. I would bet
Right.
that they did. However, that's not what they said it is.
Right.
So I tried to create a ginger pie that I actually like that felt reminiscent of it because
Right.
and I think like the pie itself is so indicative of who Maude is because again, there is no ginger pie. That's just a thing
Right.
she made.
Yeah.
She just decided I'm going to make a ginger pie and she did.
Right.
Like that's
Right.
it.
And it's
So,
like it
yeah.
doesn't exist, but that's what I want, so I'm gonna make it.
Yep. And oat straw tea. I didn't even try
No.
figuring that one out.
No.
Um, I'm curious, like how one makes oat straw tea, but
Yeah.
I don't
I
know.
mean, I might do a deep dive at some point and see if I can come up with it, but
That's
it
a
doesn't
rabbit hole
really.
for a different day.
Yeah. That's tomorrow's rabbit hole, not today's.
But so like, I tried like my family has eaten a lot of pie the last couple of weeks because I tried some custards. I don't really love them. What I ended up doing was a lemon ginger pie,
Okay.
which was not exactly what I originally wanted, but is delicious and
It
I
sounds
feel
delicious.
is kind of evocative of the pie. So I basically made like a regular pie crust, par baked that with like just a flaky pie crust, par baked it with some beans in the middle, and then finished baking it without the beans in there so that the pie crust is completely cooked.
Right.
And then into a cooked pie crust, we are putting basically a lemon curd with ginger in it
Okay.
and folding it with so instead of like a traditional lemon curd is going to use like either whipped cream or egg whites
Mhm.
to lighten it once you have cooked the egg yolks and the like butter and stuff on the stove.
Right.
So once you cook that, you're usually going to cool it down a little bit and then fold in either whipped cream or egg whites. So with the egg whites for this though, because it is a darker pie, I took instead of white sugar, I whipped the egg whites with brown sugar,
Okay.
which actually ends up with kind of like a ribbony texture instead of a whipped like fluffy texture.
Okay.
Um almost it's more reminiscent of like a sabayon texture if y'all have
Okay.
ever made that. And then I folded that together, the egg white and brown sugar mixture together into the lemon curd and put it in the pie. And then it sets up for like 2 hours at least. Um, and then you can put some whipped cream on top if you like, or if you want to candy some lemon zest. That's a really lovely addition. But yeah, it's just a very light pie. And the ginger definitely builds. So if you leave this pie in the fridge for like a day or so, you will get more ginger. Like you're gonna get that feeling as you eat a whole slice of pie.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Lemon and ginger, I feel like go very well together.
They really
So
do.
and that's a good and I've never thought about whipping egg whites with brown sugar instead of white sugar.
Yeah, I mostly tried it because I was like, well, I want the darker color, and it didn't end up super darker, but it was a little darker. I also just didn't have molasses in my house for some reason, and I didn't want to go to the store. So, um, so yeah, brown sugar, which if you are not aware, brown sugar is essentially regular, like granulated sugar with molasses in it.
Right. And I would assume like there's light brown sugar and dark brown sugar, and my assumption would be that the dark brown sugar has more molasses in it.
Yep.
It's my assumption.
Yeah.
But I usually have molasses in the house because I do enjoy it on
I
a piece of
usually do
cornbread.
too. I do too, and I could not find it, and I don't know what happened. It's probably a child. Like,
That tracks.
it's a safe assumption around here.
The children destroy everything. We love them, but they're a lot.
They are.
But they thankfully are not as much as Harold. Harold was a whole lot.
Yeah.
So,
To be determined with my children.
right.
We'll
But you can
see.
make your lemon ginger pie and watch Harold and Maude, and
Mhm.
it sounds
Just
like
have a lovely evening.
a lovely evening. If you don't want oat straw
If,
tea, I'm sure some other kind of
yeah.
tea would work as well.
Yeah. I feel like chamomile would probably go well.
Yeah.
Also, this is a lovely choice for Valentine's Day next week. If
It really is. Really is
like
a
it's
lovely
a
Valentine's movie.
beautiful story, and that's why I picked it for February, even though it's a little macabre
Sure.
and depressing. I like it. So
I like it a
I don't
lot.
know why
And
you're here if you don't like what I like. So
yeah, it's why did you come here?
I don't
If
know.
you're not interested in weird movies that are at least a little bit macabre, why are you here?
That's a you problem. Yeah. This has been a wonderful episode, and
Yeah.
I'm so glad that I got to show you yet another weird movie that you found lovely.
I did find it lovely. Sometimes you show me weird movies that I don't find lovely. Or
But then these ones are like make it worth it.
they do. It all balances out in the end.
I have to keep you hooked with the good ones so that you trust me enough to try the weird ones that
The
are
weird
not as
ones.
good.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'll
What
watch
do you think
almost
are
any movie. I'll give any movie a shot.
Yeah.
But
Thank you for co-hosting with me today.
thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
It really was. And thank you guys for being here with the Movies and Munchies with Melissa Cox. And we are part of the Neurodiversity Media Network, and we will be back another day. The show notes shall have the recipe in it, and hopefully once I get my stuff together, I will direct you towards my blog, which will also have the recipe on it once I get my life together. So who knows?
Right.
We'll see y'all later.
Bye.
Bye.